Welcome to this online service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the South Hills, also known as Sunnyhill. Our mission is to create a more just and compassionate community within and beyond our walls. My name is Rebecca Senaway, and I serve as a worship associate for this congregation. If you're a newcomer or visitor to our congregation, please let us know you're here by posting a comment here on Facebook or YouTube, or by going to sunnyhill.org and clicking on the button that says New to Sunnyhill. We would love to let you know how you can connect with the congregation even during this time when the building is closed. Our opening words were written by Kimberly Ann Tomzak Carlson. It is not by chance that you joined us today. You have been looking for something larger than yourself. Inside of you, there is a yearning, a calling, a hope for more, a desire for a place of belonging and caring. Through your struggles, someone nurtured you into being, instilling a belief in a shared purpose, a common yet precious resource that belongs to all of us when we share. And so you began seeking a beloved community, a people that does not put fences around love, a community that holds its arms open to possibilities of love, a heart home to nourish your soul and share your gifts. Welcome home. Welcome to worship.
Please join us in singing the words for lighting our chalice.
This is a chalice of audacious hope. This chalice shines a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move boldly toward our highest ideals.
The topic for our service today is MLK and the Beloved Community in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which takes place tomorrow. During this time of ongoing national crisis and threats of violence related to this week's inauguration, it seems like an especially important time to remember and honor King's work for racial justice. While many Unitarian Universalists would like to claim Martin Luther King Jr. as one of our own, he was, of course, a Baptist, not a UU, although he and his wife did have a connection with Unitarians when they lived in Boston. Years ago, in a conversation with UU minister Rosemary Bray McNatt, as reported in UU World, Coretta Scott King said, "I went to Unitarian churches for years, even before I met Martin," explaining that she had been since college a member of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, which was popular among Unitarians and Universalists. And, she said, Martin and I went to Unitarian churches when we were in Boston. They even flirted with the idea of joining the Unitarian Church. In the end, however, they decided that it was more important to their movement to work within the framework of the Black Church, which is what they did. King did serve as the Ware lecturer at the UUA General Assembly in 1966, where he shared the story that Jen will share with us in just a few minutes. Our hymns today include several spirituals that originated among enslaved Africans in America. When a congregation like ours, which is mostly, though not all, white, sings an African American spiritual, we do so not to make light of the suffering of enslaved peoples or to trivialize or disrespect their culture, but rather to honor their struggle and to stand in solidarity with their resistance to oppression in all its forms. Please join us in singing.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way
To the freedom land.
to the freedom land.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way
To the freedom land.
to the freedom land.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way
To the freedom land.
to the freedom land.
I'm on my way. Great God, I'm on my way. I asked my friend,
I asked my friend,
come and go with me.
come and go with me.
I asked my friend,
I asked my friend,
come and go with me.
come and go with me.
I asked my friend,
I asked my friend,
come and go with me.
come and go with me.
I'm on my way. Great God, I'm on my way. If they won't go,
If they won't go,
I'll go anyhow.
I'll go anyhow.
If they won't go,
If they won't go,
I'll go anyhow.
I'll go anyhow.
If they won't go,
If they won't go,
I'll go anyhow.
I'll go anyhow.
I'm on my way. Great God, I'm on my way. If you won't go,
If you won't go,
let your children go.
let your children go.
If you won't go,
If you won't go,
let your children go.
let your children go.
If you won't go,
If you won't go,
let your children go.
let your children go.
When I was little and there were thunderstorms, I would sometimes be afraid of the loud rumbling noises. My grandpa used to tell me, "Don't be afraid. The sound is just Rip Van Winkle bowling." And then he would tell me the story of Rip Van Winkle. Rip Van Winkle was a man who lived many years ago. Like my grandpa, he liked to tell stories. The story goes that he was kindly to children, but also avoided hard work or anything he thought unpleasant. One day, he found a nice grassy place on a mountain and he fell fast asleep. But this was no ordinary nap. Rip Van Winkle slept for over 20 years. 20 years! Think of all the things that could be missed in a 20-year nap. I mean, I know I like to nap, but 20 years? As a matter of fact, the most important thing that Rip Van Winkle missed was the American Revolution. When he went up that mountain, he lived in a British colony. When he came back down 20 years later, he lived in the new United States. This is an old and famous story, but would you be surprised to know that it was a favorite of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? It is one that he told a lot. As a matter of fact, he told it to a huge crowd of Unitarian Universalists in 1966, over 50 years ago. He talked about the civil rights movement and urged all those who heard him to wake up, to not sleep through the big changes that were happening all around as Black people and their supporters worked to gain equal rights. He asked white people, in particular, not to be asleep and ignore injustice. He urged Unitarian Universalists to wake up. Well, in the last several years, a new set of leaders of color are sending the same message Dr. King sent 50 years ago. Wake up. Many of the injustices, much of the unfairness is still here, and there are some new injustices. Wake up. So I'm asking all of the Unitarian Universalists tuning in this morning to remember the words of Dr. King. Wake up to injustice. We are once again at a turning point in American history. And as King said back in 1966, as he concluded that speech to that group of Unitarian Universalists, "I have not despaired of the future. I believe firmly that we can solve this problem. I know that there are still difficult days ahead, and there are days of glorious opportunity. Let us wake up, show up, breathe, and continue to do so again and again and again."
This next song, "We Shall Be Known," calls us to learn to lead in love in these times of great turning. The great turning is a phrase popularized by David Corton, referring to a human turn from an era of violence against people and nature to a new era of peace, justice, and environmental restoration. The song inspires us to appreciate the good company we keep and to go deep into the well, the source of our creativity, connection, and ability to thrive. Composer Carisha Longacre of the duo Ma Muse first conceived of this song in a dream. She says, "I woke from a dream where two dear old musical friends, one of whom has already passed, were beckoning me to come to my creative place. I followed them, their smiles and warm hearts, asking me to come forward. I awoke from the dream with the first part of the song singing through me, 'We shall be known by the company we keep.' It haunted me, and later the rest of the words found themselves in the pages of my journal." It seems an appropriate song for this week as our country turns or attempts to turn to a new page. Many thanks to Mary Pratt for adapting and directing this piece, and to Jeff Vipperman for audio and video production.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now, it is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in
shall be known. We shall be known. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these. We shall be known. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change of life from deep within the earth. We shall be known. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these lives. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change of life from deep within the earth. We shall be known. It is time now to thrive. It is time now that we thrive. It is time to lead ourselves into the well. We shall be known. It is time now to thrive. And what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Each week at this time in the service, we share joys and sorrows submitted by members of the congregation. We share the things that we are celebrating as well as the things that we are mourning, so that they do not need to be held alone. Joys and sorrows may be submitted online from our website, or you can contact me or a member of our staff or pastoral care team by email or phone. After each joy or sorrow that I read, please respond by saying, "We hold you in our hearts." A sorrow from John Graham. John says, "Monday evening, my sister-in-law, Kathy Graham, fell on her stairway and fractured her pelvis in 3 places. She underwent successful surgery on Wednesday and will be rehabbing at home." To John, his sister-in-law Kathy, and family, we hold you in our hearts. A sorrow from Joe Shaughnessy. Joe says, "My cousin Jim Fazio passed away on Sunday afternoon. He suffered a heart attack the week before that. Please keep the Blazer Fazio family in your thoughts and prayers." To Joe and to the Blazer Fazio family, we hold you in our hearts. A general sorrow. Many people have been directly or indirectly affected by the violence and threats of more violence in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere in the U.S. The trauma that has been caused by these events will be felt by many for quite some time. For all those affected by the violence, we hold you in our hearts. Let us keep in mind all these joys and sorrows, as well as those held too closely to be shared at this time. I invite you to join me in the spirit of prayer or meditation. How we long for peace. In the midst of ceaseless activity, we long for peace. In the midst of personal crises and upheavals, we long for peace. In the midst of squabbles and conflicts with others, we long for peace. In the midst of physical and emotional violence, we long for peace. In the midst of terror and fear, we long for peace. How we long for peace. In the silence of this moment, let peace descend upon us like a dove, like a blanket, like the hand of a friend. And in stillness, let us together create a space for peace. May we know the ceaseless flow of peace. May the rush of joy lift us up. May love sustain us. May our pain find comfort and healing. May our tears cleanse our hearts and minds. And may we find the strength to persevere. Amen.
I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got tears like raindrops. I've got tears like raindrops. I've got tears like raindrops in my soul. I've got tears like raindrops. I've got tears like raindrops. I've got tears like raindrops in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got peace
Over the past 4 years or so, I've railed against the very real evils that have been unleashed in our country and around the world as a result of authoritarian leaders and their cynical disregard for anything even vaguely resembling the common good. Leaders who have legitimized and facilitated a new wave of fear and hatred, a wave of religious nationalism, xenophobia, greed, misogyny, homophobia, paranoid fantasies, white supremacist violence, and a disdain for science and rational thought, a wave that has threatened to extinguish the already thin and flickering flame of democracy here and elsewhere. As I mentioned last week, as religious liberals, we have a moral obligation to call out these evils and to take action against them. We can't just talk and moan about all the things that are wrong in our society. We also have to act by voting, by holding accountable our elected representatives, by organizing and advocating for change, and by speaking up and taking to the streets when we can in solidarity with all of those who are oppressed. But any movement that strives to be successful over the long run cannot simply be against something. We must stand for something. We must have a compelling vision of the world we dream about, and we must be able to articulate this vision in a compelling way. One phrase that is often used to describe what we as religious progressives are working for is the beloved community. It's a phrase that is often associated with Martin Luther King Jr., but it was originally coined by Josiah Royce. Royce, an American philosopher who taught and wrote in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, saw the beloved community as a goal, the best of everyone working for the best for all. The beloved community was a vision of what might be and a means of measuring whether something was worth pursuing or not. As Royce wrote in 1913, every proposed reform, every moral deed is to be tested by whether and to what extent it contributes to the realization of the beloved community. When one cannot find the beloved community, one needs to take steps to create it. And if there is not evidence of the existence of such a community, then the rule to live by is to act so as to hasten its coming. Josiah Royce saw beloved community as something that was both the now and the not yet. In other words, it's something that we can realize here and now, while also accepting that fulfilling the broader vision will require work that extends beyond our own lifetimes. Royce wrote about the beloved community as something rooted in loyalty, or in his words, in the practically devoted love of an individual for a community. Martin Luther King Jr. first encountered Royce's work when he was a doctoral student at Boston University in the early 1950s. King saw beloved community as a concept grounded in agape, in the love of the Christian Gospels. In King's words, agape is a love by which the individual seeks not his own good, but the good of his neighbor. Agape does not begin by discriminating between worthy and unworthy people or any qualities people possess. It begins by loving others for their sakes. Agape is not a weak, passive love. King asserted. It is love in action. Agape is love seeking to preserve and create community. It is insistence on community even when one seeks to break it. In the final analysis, agape means a recognition of the fact that all life is interrelated, all humanity is involved in a single process, and all men are brothers. Those are the words of King from his 1958 essay, An Experiment in Love, a remarkable piece of writing in which he also said, "The aftermath of nonviolence is the creation of the beloved community, so that when the battle's over, a new relationship comes into being between the oppressed and the oppressor. The way of acquiescence," he continued, "leads to moral and spiritual suicide. The way of violence leads to bitterness in the survivors and brutality in the destroyers. But the way of nonviolence leads to redemption and the creation of the beloved community." So for King, beloved community was what would result from combining the Christian concept of agape love with the Gandhian concept of nonviolence. By the way, King's idea of nonviolence was not a passive nonviolence. It was an active, confrontative, strategic tool to be used to achieve the goal of the beloved community. It is also important to keep in mind that for King, the beloved community was not some pie-in-the-sky utopian goal that might be confused with the bucolic image of the peaceable kingdom in which lions and lambs coexist in idyllic harmony. Rather, the beloved community was for him a realistic, achievable goal that could be attained by a critical mass of people committed to and trained in the philosophy and methods of nonviolence. King believed, as Josiah Royce did, that, as I said a moment ago, the beloved community was both the now and the not yet. King's philosophy was a radical philosophy in that it rejected the status quo of American empire. It rejected the premise that self-interest is or ought to be our highest ideal. As I've mentioned before, the radical legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. has been sanitized and whitewashed to a great extent in recent years. Rather than being seen as the impassioned firebrand for racial and economic justice that he was, he is often portrayed as a sort of warm, fuzzy mascot for societal change in America, someone who politely advocated for incremental change without disrupting our regularly scheduled programming. But that's not who King was. And we are dishonoring his legacy if we remember him as an essentially harmless black man who learned to work within the white American power structure without stepping on anyone's toes or inconveniencing anyone. At the time of his death in 1968, only about 30% of Americans supported Dr. King's work, according to polls conducted at that time, in part because it was clear to the people of that era that King was, in fact, attempting to bring about radical change. And beloved community is what King put forth as an alternative to the false American idols of racism, materialism, and militarism. Those three evils that King named, racism, materialism, and militarism, were on prominent display in the insurrection on Capitol Hill a week and a half ago. The Confederate flags and anti-Semitic T-shirts, the number of upper middle class white protesters turned rioters who arrived flying business class and staying at 4-star hotels, the military garb and weapons that the insurrectionists sported, all of these things were signs that racism, materialism, and militarism are still thriving in America. The community of rioters that assembled in Washington, D.C. on January 6th was one based in the false values of hatred and selfishness. The Make America Great Again movement has never been about the common good or expanding democracy. It has been about the good of the few over the many and limiting participation in democracy. Trumpism and the Make America Great Again movement represent the absolute antithesis of King's beloved community. In the words of King, there was no understanding, redeeming goodwill for all, no overflowing love operating in the human heart, no loving others for their sakes. But this week, there is reason to hope. There is reason to believe that other, saner, more principled voices might once again be heard. There is reason to hold on to the promise of beloved community once again. In her vice presidential nomination acceptance speech, Kamala Harris said, "I accept your nomination for Vice President of the United States of America, committed to the values my mother taught me, to the word that teaches me to walk by faith and not by sight, and to a vision passed on through generations of Americans, a vision of our nation as a beloved community where all are welcome no matter what we look like, no matter where we come from or who we love. A country," Harris continued, "where we may not agree on every detail, but we are united by the fundamental belief that every human being is of infinite worth, deserving of compassion, dignity, and respect. A country where we look out for one another, where we rise and fall as one, where we face our challenges and celebrate our triumphs together." Of course, it's one thing to merely use the language of beloved community, and another to actually live it and help bring it into being. And it will be up to all of us to remain vigilant and engaged to ensure that the values of beloved community are acted upon by all of our elected leaders. So there are reasons today to be discouraged, and there are reasons to hope. The hymn that we're going to sing in a few minutes, the spiritual, "There is a Balm in Gilead," was a particular favorite of Martin Luther King's. The lyrics are taken from a lament in the book of Jeremiah that reads as follows: "My joy is gone, grief is upon me, my heart is sick. Hark the cry of my poor people from far and wide in the land. For the hurt of my poor people I am hurt, I mourn, and dismay has taken hold of me. Is there no balm of Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then has the health of my poor people been not restored? Oh, that my head were a spring of water and my eyes a fountain of tears, so that I might weep day and night for the slain, my poor people." King ended a speech in Chicago in 1967 with these words: "Centuries ago, Jeremiah raised the question, is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? He raised it because he saw the good people suffering so often and the evil people prospering. Centuries later, our enslaved foreparents came along, and they too saw the injustices of life and had nothing to look forward to morning after morning but the rawhide whip of the overseer, long rows of cotton in the sizzling heat. But they did an amazing thing. They looked back across the centuries and they took Jeremiah's question mark and straightened it into an exclamation point, and they could sing, "There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul." As I mentioned earlier, Martin Luther King was a Baptist, not a Unitarian Universalist, and his theology differed from that of most of us. However, his vision of the healing power of the beloved community is one that resonates strongly with us and with many other religious progressives. Marin Tirabassi, a United Church of Christ minister, wrote a revised version of "There is a Balm in Gilead" in honor of MLK Day. It reads in part as follows: "Sometimes we feel discouraged and think our work's in vain, but those who've gone before us revive our hearts again. There is a balm in Gilead to heal and to console. There is a blessed community that loves until it's whole." As we commemorate Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and as we mark a new beginning for our country, I hope and pray that we will recommit ourselves to bringing into being the beloved community in which love will defeat fear and hatred, and justice will roll down, redeeming, restoring, and healing all in its wake. May it be so. Amen.
There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Sometimes I feel discouraged and think my work's in vain, but then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. If you cannot preach like Peter, if you cannot pray like Paul, you can tell the love of Jesus and say he died for all. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul.
We'll now give and receive our morning offering. If you'd like to make a donation via our online giving system, you can do so one of two ways. You can go to sunnyhill.org and click on the button that says Online Giving and then follow the instructions. Once you get to the drop-down menu, just choose 2021 Pledge Collections if you're making a pledge payment, or Non-Pledge Collections if you're making a gift that is not a pledge payment. Or you can give by text at 412-324-3130. Just dial that number using your smartphone and follow the instructions. You can also mail a check if you prefer, and you can find our mailing address on our website, sunnyhill.org. Thank you for your generosity.
Civil rights activist James Weldon Johnson wrote Lift Their Voice and Sing as a poem, which was set to music by his brother John Roseman Johnson in 1899. The song is now known as the Black National Anthem in America. It is a protest, a hymn, and a prayer of profound significance for our people. We lift every voice and sing to express ourselves. We lift every voice to show that we have strength in numbers and we will not be silent. We lift every voice and sing to be lifted, liberated, and free.
Freedom, the power to determine action without restraint. Freedom, the absence of or release from ties, obligations, or restrictions. Freedom, the ease or facility of movement or action. Freedom, frankness or boldness in manner or speech. Freedom, a political right. Until we are all free, none of us is free. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Black lives matter.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the roaring sea. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the roaring sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
God of our weary ears, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Oh, let's not be safe from what God will be drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Please join us in saying the words for extinguishing our chalice.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our closing words, inspired by the work of Rabbi Hillel, were written by Andrea Hawkins Camper. May we see all as it is, and may it all be as we see it. May we be the ones to make it as it should be. For if not us, who? If not now, when? This is answering the cry of justice with the work of peace. This is redeeming the pain of history with the grace of wisdom. This is the work we are called to do, and this is the call we answer now. To be the barrier and the bridge. To be the living embodiment of our principles. To be about the work of building the beloved community. To be a people of intention and a people of conscience. Go in peace.